Hello, I'm Scott Garlock, and I'm a trombone player in the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra. And today we're going to talk a little bit about basic ear training on your horn for better musicianship and for jazz. A couple of stories why I think this is important. When I was 18, I was gigging a bit, just fresh out of high school, and some friends said, well, you should call this guy. He's in Cleveland, and he hires a lot of people for gigs. So I called the gentleman, and he was very nice to me, asked me what I was doing and who I was playing with. And he said, okay, well, do you know tunes? And I said, well, I guess I do. I think I know tunes. And he said, well, if I were to ask you to play I Left My Heart in San Francisco in the key of C on a bandstand, could you do it? And I said, no, sir, but I'll call you back when I can. And if we scroll another 25 years or so later, after working to try and get ears on my horn a little bit better, I was playing in Peoria for their NPR station, and there was a trio that would play every Sunday night, and they would have a guest horn player in every week, and so I would rotate in maybe every 3 months or so. Anyway, the band leader was kind of famous for doing this. We'd create a song list before we'd play, and invariably after the first tune, he would forget what was on the song list, and without telling you what the tune was, he would just launch into an introduction, and you'd have to say, okay, I think he's playing Blackbird, and I think he's in the key of F. And if I hadn't done the grunt work on my horn, I would have embarrassed the 14 people listening in Peoria that evening on a Sunday night. So this is a really valuable skill to have, not only so you don't embarrass yourself, but all sorts of other reasons too. When we improvise, we're always using kind of a combination of our mind and our ears. There are jazz players that use their minds almost strictly, and then there are others that don't know much music theory at all but rely on a great set of ears. Every musician has a different percentage of each that they use, but it is also true that we take in so much of our sensory input through sight. So as a musician, our ears are just very, very important, and they're already kind of starting in a deficit, because when we start playing in 5th grade, we're given music, and we read music from the time we get our instruments, and we concentrate on trying to render those symbols rather than maybe focusing much more on the process of making music, how we sound, and getting our ears to work. And this wasn't always the case. When classical musicians once upon a time would just apprentice with another master classical musician. They'd watch them play, they'd ask questions, and they'd ape what they did without the benefit of having publishing houses crank out books for beginners like we have now. This process all stopped in earnest after Beethoven got bothered by people butchering their creations of cadenzas on his piano sonatas. So he started to write out these cadenzas, and really kind of from that point on, most classical musicians don't improvise. So that's a bad thing. As there's lots of benefits to kind of learning how to use your ears on your instruments. So some of these reasons include, when you're not using music, you can really, again, concentrate much more on the focus of how does this feel and how do I sound. Most master musicians do not read music when they warm up. They're really focusing more on what's the process of my sound making at this particular moment. How does this feel? How am I sounding? And how can I adjust to those factors? Generally speaking, if you get better ears on your instrument, you're going to play much more in tune, and you're going to be a lot more sensitive in your ensembles, because you're going to know what your role is in the ensemble much more. And you're going to, generally speaking, develop a much better tone because you're focusing so much more on that particular attribute. And as a jazz musician, it's most certainly going to help your improv skills, because it's going to connect your brain and your ears and your hands much faster than if you're just simply thinking about it and reading symbols. And as you figure things out, no matter what they are, on your instrument, you're far closer to owning them. You're far closer to having them kind of appear in your solos. So here's some things to try. Just try to play Jingle Bells starting on a concert B flat. And for many of us, that's going to sound maybe not so great, because you're maybe not thinking in the right key, or you're not really thinking with your ears. You're just thinking, I'm in B flat. You're not really in B flat if you're trying to play Jingle Bells starting on a B flat. So, using Christmas tunes and nursery rhymes is really a great way for you to kind of get going on developing ears on your horn. They're really predictable tunes, and you've known them since the time you were the smallest human. They've got really regular phrases, they've got very small leaps, and they hardly ever have any chromatics. So they're really good choices for you to kind of get launched on this. The next thing you can do is try and play commercials. I mean, you're listening to the TV and a McDonald's commercial comes on. I mean, that's not that hard, but you're developing your ears as you do so. And then from there, you might want to try and play some top 40 songs, because again, they've got some very regular phrases. Lots of top 40 songs use pentatonics, so 5 notes are all you have to worry about for a great deal of them. Then you might want to try some video game music, themes from TV shows or movies. These get increasingly more difficult because they get more leaps and they get more chromaticism. Then you want to try and just find some people that solo, either on your instrument or not, that do things that aren't terrifically technical. The easier that these are, the better, because it gets really frustrating trying to listen to someone play that plays at a speed faster than you're comfortable playing, or that if they might play too high for you. So choose something that doesn't have a lot of notes, that's kind of sparse. One of the most transcribed solos is Miles Davis's solo on So What. And I'm just going to play a little at the beginning of that. There's only 4 or 5 notes in this at the beginning. So again, not very hard, and certainly within the range and technical ability of just about any high schooler. So that's a really good thing to do. I know that most of my early listening and trying to figure out solos were done with like the solos of Wayne Henderson and the Jazz Crusaders, because they weren't completely beyond me technically, and the note choices were really pretty obvious. It made it easier for me to grab. If you are with the benefit of having people that you can play with, you can take turns just playing short riffs and and echo them back and forth to one another. And you can just start real simple. Just start, hey, we're going to be in the key of B flat. We're going to just use only 3 notes, B flat, D, and D flat. That's all you're going to play, and try and get those mastered. Then add an F, add an A flat, add a G, add a C, and then maybe even some more chromatics. The more you do this sort of thing, you're going to find that you're going to be able to predict the sounds that you're hearing in your head much quicker, and it will start to pop out of your horns. You're still going to make mistakes. We all do, all the time, but you're going to find that this becomes much more accurate and much quicker to do as a process. So that will then lead you to transcribing solos like we were just talking about. When you do that, be patient with yourself. Just try and do 2 notes, 3 notes, a bar, then try and do 2 bars, then try and do a phrase. Don't try and do the whole thing. It's just super frustrating. Just keep it simple and just work on getting that skill better and better and better. And for directors, I've found that this approach seems to work a lot better than trying to give a lot of rules to my students. A whole lot of my students come to me with little jazz background, and they're super inhibited about the idea of improvisation. So I just have them play, and I don't tell them much of anything. And after a span of time, and I have my students play solos in every concert we give, they start to develop something that resembles jazz phrases, and they're doing it in their own unique way. And when they've gotten accustomed to that, they've kind of developed a little bit of ears on their horn, I start to throw some theory in the mix. I'll say things like, okay, over this chord, you might want to think about doing a D instead of what you are doing right now. So that's a thing to try. All right, well, I think that's all we have to say on this topic today, and we thank you for your attention, and Hope you enjoyed this and the other videos that are going to come at you from the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra. Bye now.